So, you've definitely heard the word monopoly before, but we're not talking about the board game, we're talking about the real deal. A market where one single company is the entire game. They set the rules, they set the prices, and they basically control a whole industry. It's a super powerful and, often controversial force in economics.
Companies with this kind of power, they almost never call themselves a monopoly. No way. They'll say something a little softer, like this. It's a pretty clever way to frame it, isn't it? The only game in town just sounds less threatening. But make no mistake, the effect is exactly the same. Everybody has to play by your rules.
So that's the big question we're going to tackle. How does one company end up holding all the cards? Is it just dumb luck, superior skill, or are there some really specific economic forces at play that build up these massive market giants? Let's dive in and break it all down.
Okay, so to really get a handle on monopolies, you have to look at why competition just doesn't exist for them. And the simple answer is something we call barriers to entry. These are these powerful forces that stop any other company from even getting a foot in the door. And these aren't just accidents, they are basically fundamental walls that protect a monopolist's fortress.
All right, here's the textbook definition for you, but the key phrase, the one I really want you to lock onto, is price maker. See, in a normal competitive market, firms are price takers. They just have to accept whatever the going rate is. But a monopolist? A monopolist gets to set the price for the entire market. And that one little bit of power, well, it changes absolutely everything.
So how do these walls get built? Well, it usually boils down to one of three things. First, you could own a key resource. Think about how De Beers historically controlled most of the world's diamond mines. Second, the government can step in, giving out things like patents or copyrights that grant one company exclusive rights. And third, you have what's called a natural monopoly. This is where it's just plain more efficient for one firm to serve everybody, kind of like the company that pipes water to your house.
All right, so a firm has made it. It's the only game in town. Now what? Well, this is where its power as a price maker completely changes the game of supply and demand, causing it to act in ways that are totally different from a regular competitive company.
This slide really shows the night and day difference. A competitive firm is a price taker. It can sell as much as it wants at that one market price. But a monopolist is the market. It faces the entire demand curve for that product, which slopes downward. And what that means is, if it wants to sell more stuff, it has to lower the price. There's no way around it.
And that leads us to the single most important difference of all. For a monopolist, the extra money it gets from selling one more unit, we call that its marginal revenue, is always less than the price it's charging. Now, why is that? Think about it. To sell one more widget, they have to drop the price. But here's the catch. They don't just drop the price for that new customer, they have to drop it for all their customers. And that right there is the monopolist's big dilemma.
Let's make this real. Imagine JJ's is the only hair salon in town. To get more people in the door, they have to lower their price. So take a look at this table. As the number of haircuts goes up and the price goes down, what do you think is going to happen to their total revenue? And more importantly, what about that marginal revenue from each new customer? And boom, here are the numbers. Now look closely at that marginal revenue column. To get that second customer, they had to drop the price to $50. But the extra revenue they actually made, only $45. And to get that third customer for $45, their marginal revenue dropped even more, down to $35. You see it, right? The price is always higher than the marginal revenue. That simple little fact, MR is less than P, drives every single decision a monopolist makes.
Now, this power to set prices and control how much is produced, that doesn't just exist in a textbook. It has real consequences for all of us, for consumers, and for society as a whole. So the really big question becomes, is a monopoly's profit just good business, or does it come at a pretty significant cost to the rest of us?
Okay, so here it is, the monopolist's secret playbook for maximizing profit. Step one is pretty simple. Keep producing right up to the point where the revenue from your last item equals what it cost you to make it. In econ speak, that's where MR equals MC. But, and this is the big twist, step two, they don't charge that price. Nope, they look at the demand curve and they charge the absolute highest price people are willing to pay for that specific quantity.
And the outcome of that strategy? Well, it's a totally different world compared to a competitive market. In a competitive market, price equals the marginal cost, and that leads to an efficient amount of stuff being produced for society. But in a monopoly, the price is always higher than the marginal cost. And because of that, the monopolist produces less than what would be socially ideal, and this creates a huge problem.
And that problem has a name: deadweight loss.
Now, this is so important to understand. The social cost of a monopoly isn't the profit the company makes. That's really just money moving from consumers to the producer. The real problem, the social cost, is the deadweight loss. It's the value from all the sales that don't happen because the price is too high and the quantity is too low. It's economic value that just, poof, vanishes into thin air. It's lost to everyone.
But what if a monopolist could get even smarter? I mean, what if they had a kind of superpower? Instead of setting one high price for everybody, what if they could charge different prices to different people for the exact same product? Well, that's called price discrimination, and it's basically a monopolist's ultimate tool for grabbing even more profit.
Now, to pull this off, a company just needs a way to sort its customers based on how much they're willing to pay. And once you start looking for it, I promise you'll see it everywhere. Senior discounts at the movies, crazy airline ticket prices, coupons in the mail, even financial aid for college. These are all forms of price discrimination.
We've all been there, right? You're sitting on a plane, and you just can't help but wonder what the person next to you paid for their seat. This quote just nails that feeling. Airlines are absolute masters of price discrimination. They're experts at separating business travelers who will pay almost anything from vacationers who are way more sensitive to price. Okay, now here's where things get really interesting and kind of weird. If a monopolist could achieve perfect price discrimination, I mean charging every single customer the exact maximum price they're willing to pay, it would actually get rid of that deadweight loss we talked about. It would produce the efficient quantity. But here's the catch. Every single drop of economic value, including everything that would have been consumer surplus, gets captured by the company as profit. So it's technically efficient, but you got to ask yourself, is it fair?
So given this whole deadweight loss problem and these big questions about fairness, it's probably no surprise that governments often decide to step in and do something about monopolies. But as you can imagine, trying to rein in one of these market giants is anything but simple.
Policymakers basically have four main tools they can use. First, they could use antitrust laws to try and boost competition, maybe even by breaking up a big company. Second, they can regulate the prices the monopoly is allowed to charge. Third, they can go for public ownership and turn the whole company into a government-run enterprise. Or, and this happens more than you'd think, they might decide that the cure could be worse than the disease and just choose to do nothing at all.
So let's wrap this all up with a final showdown. On pretty much every key feature, competition and monopoly are polar opposites. Competition has many firms. Monopoly has one. And that one single difference causes all the others. The relationship between revenue and price, that big gap between price and cost, and, most importantly for all of us, the difference between an efficient outcome for society and one that creates wasteful deadweight loss.
And that brings us to one last thought to leave you with. Think about a full airplane, a 747, where almost nobody paid the same price for their ticket. Now, based on everything we've talked about, is that price discrimination inefficient? Well, surprisingly, it might actually be more efficient than if the airline just charged one high price. But the bigger question, the one with no easy answer is it fair? And is the airline's profit a social cost? It's a perfect example of how these big economic ideas are playing out in our world every single day.